President Mnangagwa has recently dismissed several security chiefs. Many analysts suggest that the removal of the former commander of the Zimbabwe National Army, Anselem Sanyatwe, is a part of a broader strategy to weaken Vice President Constantino Chiwenga's influence. However, our investigation reveals a different perspective. While Sanyatwe's dismissal appears to be a power move, it is not necessarily aimed at undermining Chiwenga in the way that people think. We went around asking questions from high-placed sources, and what we were told is that instead, this signals a strategic appointment with deeper implications. We conducted extensive research and identified 5 key factors that reinforce the argument that Sanyatwe is a dark horse in Mnangagwa's latest political moves. To understand this, we first have to revisit Zimbabwe's liberation war. While discussions on the war legacy may seem repetitive, the significance of the war in shaping the country's power dynamics cannot be ignored. Whether we like it or not, political influence in Zimbabwe is often tied to war credentials. I mean, even figures like Blessed Geza, they retain a significant amount of relevance because of their perceived wartime contributions. You have to admit it that the only reason a number of people listen to Geza is because of his perceived war credentials and his perceived links to the military. If Geza had been a political non-entity or a political small boy, if Geza's name was Elias Mzuri or it was Douglas Monzora or Nkosana Moyo, who was saying the exact same things that Geza is saying, the probability is that a lot of people would just pretty much ignore them. Now, with regard to Mnangagwa and Sanyatwe, they share a long-standing relationship that dates back to the liberation struggle. And you could say, just as Mnangagwa served as Robert Mugabe's trusted aide during the war, Sanyatwe played a similar runner role in quotes. He was very close to Mnangagwa during the war and often carried out tasks for him. This is important because historically, those who serve as close aides to a president, or our president, they often ascend to power themselves. Mugabe to Mnangagwa being a prime example. Now I understand it may even be the only example, but from what analysts and experts tell us, a Sanyatwe presidency may not be entirely out of reach. Moreover, Sanyatwe has consistently had direct access to Mnangagwa, sometimes bypassing Chiwenga even at the time when he was in the army. And after the 2017 coup, Sanyatwe was assigned to a diplomatic post in Tanzania, a seemingly low-level appointment, on the looks of it. However, it's the way that he came back that sort of feeds into this new perspective that we're getting. His abrupt recall as ambassador to Tanzania and subsequent appointment as commander of the Zimbabwe National Army, it took many people, including Chiwenga, by surprise. Seriously, take this from us. Chiwenga did not know Sanyatwe was recalled as an ambassador or that he was being appointed as army chief until the announcement went out. He had no clue, just like you and probably just like me. While presidential appointments are of course a norm, it's the president's prerogative to make those appointments and remove them. It's notable that Chiwenga, his right-hand man who delivered the presidency to him, was reportedly left out of discussions regarding Sanyatwe's return, especially given how Sanyatwe had been against Operation Restore Legacy. So the fact that Chiwenga didn't know, it reinforces the notion that Sanyatwe's allegiances, they lie firmly with Emmerson Mnangagwa. And that's not the only point. Now, another thing is Mnangagwa's recent dismissal of these security service chiefs. They've targeted individuals loyal to Chiwenga for the most part, but there are a lot of clues in how these individuals were fired and where they are. Think of Air Marshal Anselem Moyo. He was a key figure during the coup who was considered a contingency replacement if Parents Shiri had not played ball. So if Shiri had tried to instruct the Air Force to counter the coup, Anselem Moyo was on standby to reverse that. That's how close he was to the powers that be at the time. Anselem Moyo has not been given a cabinet role. He is spending the majority of his time at his farm. He had effectively a more senior role than Sanyatwe because he had been in that role for slightly longer. And he was removed and he is now home. He is not in cabinet, he is nowhere, right? Think Godwin Matanga. Godwin Matanga is the former Commissioner General of Police and another Chiwenga ally. Matanga was also dismissed and he remains inactive. There is no cabinet post for him. There is no ambassador role, nothing. And then obviously Isaac Moyo, the former Director General of the Central Intelligence Organization, the CIO. Isaac was similarly removed from his post without a new government assignment. Now, of course, Isaac Moyo is not a Chiwenga guy, but he is a serious security chief. He too is now at home for now. There's been no appointment when it comes to Isaac. And then, thinking of bigwigs, similarly, someone who played a significant role during the military intervention, Lieutenant General David Sigauke, the former army commander and a serious Chiwenga loyalist. He was retired and reassigned as Zimbabwe's ambassador to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Sigauke is in theory more senior than Sanyatwe, but again, when Sigauke was retired, there was no cabinet position. The only difference between Sanyatwe and Sigauke is that Sanyatwe, unbeknown to many, is the president's guy. In contrast, the only security chief granted a cabinet position is Sanyatwe. And we think this further underscores his proximity to Mnangagwa. Sources describe Sanyatwe as Mnangagwa's blue-eyed boy, someone who consistently carried out tasks directly for the president, often even bypassing the chain of command. A source within the security sector that cannot be named to protect relationships. He described Sanyatwe as follows. He said Sanyatwe is loyal, disciplined, and entirely aligned with Mnangagwa's vision. He follows orders without hesitation and has a deep understanding of the country's security landscape. Should there ever be a threat to Mnangagwa's position, you'd think Sanyatwe is the one person who understands Zimbabwe through and through. He was a tactical commander for a very, very, very long time. And it goes further than that. Vice President Kembo Mohadi's health has been a subject of speculation for some time. Reports suggest that he may not remain in office much longer, either due to health concerns or political realignment. Mohadi's position as vice president has fluctuated a lot in recent years. His political influence is very limited. There's a time when he was vice president, then he wasn't vice president. Look, people largely see him as the plus one. You have the bride and the bridegroom. And his departure has been flouted to us as something which is possible. And we understand that there are intensified discussions regarding his successor, especially given the health reasons. Now, also indicate that Sanyatwe is being positioned as a potential vice president. His retirement from the military appears to be a strategic step towards integrating him into mainstream politics. More than that, it looks like he's being primed. He's already worked as an ambassador, so he's been a diplomat. He's worked as the army commander. He now has what it takes. And in a previous episode, if you remember, Christopher Mchangwa, he might have said a lot, but he did mention that there was a potential of a dark horse. many of the things that Mnangagwa said, some of them were not quite accurate, but there were things there that made sense. And specifically the part that Chiwenga will be railroaded and replaced by another candidate that we're not quite aware of. And Sanyatwe is emerging as a key player in this plan. And contrary to prevailing narratives, Sanyatwe's removal from the army is not about neutralizing Chiwenga's influence at the army itself. The army is a very big organization. One person doesn't hold sway, and soldiers, they swear to protect the country with their blood, not individuals. So soldiers in the barracks are not loyal to Chiwenga, they're loyal to the country. That's what they swear, to die for. So Sanyatwe comes in as a new political player into this political landscape. So he's basically been positioned to be, I guess in Chris Mnangagwa's words, a caricature of Constantine Chiwenga, albeit with foreign affairs experience. Now, to a limited degree, ethnicity remains a significant, albeit understated factor in Zimbabwean politics. During Mugabe's tenure, there were frequent references to a Zezuru cabal dominating government structures. If you ever picked up the paper at the time, we love big words, Zezuru cabal, Zezuru cabal. That's now pretty much been replaced by Karanga cabal. And that happened after Mnangagwa rose to power. Karanga elites have gained greater prominence. Think Nick Mangwana coming from the UK where he worked as a nurse to become the Secretary for Information. There's a lot of Karangas in very influential positions. Isaac Moyo, who was the DG. So it sounds far-fetched and limited, but totemic identities, they do play a role in Zimbabwe's current political landscape. Now, we understand that Mnangagwa and Sanyatwe reportedly address each other using familial terms, Mkoma, which means older brother, and Mningina, younger brother, rather than the formal ties of boss or sir. And of course, this sounds trivial, right? Much like that story of Mnangagwa hates Chiwenga because they had a rivalry as chiefs and stuff like that. It's trivial, yeah. But it does add another layer to the connection between Sanyatwe and Mnangagwa. And it reinforces the perception of Sanyatwe as Mnangagwa's trusted ally and not as Chiwenga's right-hand man, as has been reported quite frequently. We know it looks like it, but our understanding, Sanyatwe, he's not loyal to Chiwenga. We've found no evidence that he's loyal to Chiwenga. If anything, we've found significant evidence that he is one of the people who will do anything for the president. He's got unmatched loyalty to President Mnangagwa. So Sanyatwe isn't Chiwenga's person. He isn't Chiwenga's person at all. Sanyatwe is Mnangagwa's person. One certainty in Zimbabwean politics is that Mnangagwa's moves, they are often unpredictable. As we have noted in a previous analysis, many people expected Brigadier General Tapfumane, retired, to become the next army commander. However, Mnangagwa defied expectations with that appointment, something that he had done again. When Isaac Moyo was fired, Tapfumane was earmarked for that next job. It wasn't given to him. Nobody saw Mangwanya coming, and people thought, Tapfumane is going to go back to the army. We did say that we've instances of people crossing over from CIO to the army, they're extremely limited. They're very rare. It's very rare to have been among one of the first. Most times it's the reverse. But the question was, what happens next? While we cannot predict Mnangagwa's next steps with certainty, one thing is clear from the 5 points we've raised in this analysis, which is key players in Zimbabwe's power struggle agree on one thing: Sanyatwe's allegiance, it's to Mnangagwa and not to Chiwenga, at least at the moment. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your support. Like, share, and subscribe. For further insights, check out our 2 previous episodes: Sanyatwe's removal and its implications to the Zimbabwean political sphere, and this video about the Central Intelligence Organization under Isaac Moyo. That will help you understand Zimbabwe's intelligence apparatus, as well as how statecraft operates in Zimbabwe. So Cheers, and we will see you again in the next episode of Perspectives. Goodbye.